I call it the R.E.M.A.P Framework. It's a foundational framework for transforming how we interact and communicate with one another. And the framework itself is really based on all of the work that I do, based on emotional intelligence, based on mindfulness and communication. When we look at each of these components, they have a role in how we lead into our communication. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back to another episode. I am so grateful and excited to be here for another episode with you. And, it's summertime. It's summertime and it's halfway through the year, as I cannot believe. And a lot has been going on, both in the world, but also personally. There's been a lot of movement in my world from a work standpoint. Have traveled for several speaking engagements and supporting trainings and also a little bit of vacation time because that's what we do in the summertime. We take a little break. And so as speaking of breaks, I had taken a little bit of a recording break for the past few weeks. And as I was on that break, I was reflecting on what did I want to bring you all as we get ready to enter our mid-season break. So this is going to be the last episode before our mid-season break. And we typically do take a little mid-season break around this time and we pick up again, usually around the early fall season or late summer season. So there will be episodes, but there'll be recaps and there'll be recaps of episodes of themes. We're doing it a little bit differently this year, so it should be fun. But I was reflecting on what is it that I want to share in this last episode that I can continue and deepen when we come back for the mid-season break. Over the last several months, I have been creating something. Been creating a framework with the work that I do in trauma-informed communication, in interpersonal connectedness, in neuroscience-based communication, in building trust and safety. I've been doing this work for a while. There are so many elements that are present that I wanted to create a concise framework for people to refer to be able to develop tools around. And one day I was just inspired by someone in my community, in my professional community, to do so. And so I've been at work reflecting on how to compile everything that I have been teaching and speaking about into a buildable framework for both the individual to refer to and for teams and organizations to refer to. And so I'm going to introduce that to you today. And I call it the R.E.M.A.P Framework. It's a foundational framework for transforming how we interact and communicate with one another. And the framework itself is really based on all of the work that I do, based on emotional intelligence, based on mindfulness and communication. And so let's dive into it for a moment. Let's dive into what is this R.E.M.A.P framework. R.E.M.A.P is an acronym, and the R stands for recognize, reflect, and respect. The E is emotional awareness and courage. The M is model, mirror, and mend. The A is adaptability, accountability, and acknowledgement. And the P is practicing progress over perfection. So, just delving very briefly into this framework, when we look at each of these components, they have a role in how we lead into our communication. And so when we look at the R, the recognize, the reflect, and respect, this triad really anchors the framework in a powerful blend of personal and interpersonal and even systemic awareness. When we have recognition without reflection, it could be reactive. And when we have recognition with respect, it honors relationship and it honors humanity. So, this first pillar of the R, the recognize, the reflect, and the respect, allows us to have a mindful noticing of internal cues and body sensations, emotions, and behaviors, invites a pause of this sort of critical self inquiry and conscious thought before action. And it centers the practice of honoring another's humanity, even in the face of differing views, values, and opinion. And so, when we recognize and we reflect, we can bring in emotional awareness and even encourage. And so, this E with the emotional awareness and courage pillar supports resilience, trust, and honest communication. It encourages emotional regulation, it encourages personal growth while inviting in a bold and equity, trauma informed, aligned engagement, even when the stakes are high. And so it's really the cornerstone that emotional awareness and courage is one of the cornerstones of trauma responsiveness and compassionate leadership. The emotional awareness helps us track our own and others' emotional states, while the courage gives us permission to stay present through discomfort, speak our truths, and challenge systems or behaviors with integrity. Now, when we look at the pillar, the M pillar, modeling, mirroring, and mending, this pillar makes visible the responsibility not only to lead by example, but really to clean up the missteps when harm or disconnection occurs. This pillar supports cultures where leaders are human, accountable, and committed to restoring trust. When we model, we set the tone for safe, courageous, and inclusive communication. And when we mirror, we reflect the emotional tone and value and impact our back to the people with whom we're interacting, back to our systems, back to our communities. And the men brings in this essential practice of relational repair and restorative action when needed. And this is a space that many leadership and communication frameworks actually leave out. So, as we move into the A, the adaptability, accountability, and acknowledgement, we have a pillar that affirms equity is not just about intention, but about ownership and responsiveness. This pillar creates a space for healing, humility, and for growth and expansion. So when we're adaptable, we're speaking to the ability to be flexible in our behaviors, our listening, and our communication responses. When we talk about accountability, and you know, I talk about accountability a lot in my my podcast. I often speak about accountability. In fact, I think I did a whole couple of episodes on being accountable. But the accountability supports the ownership of impact, that our impact on others, whether it be positive or whether it be negative. When we are accountable, we're accountable to our impact on others. And in the cases where harm is caused, we can be accountable without defensiveness and without ongoing shame, because we know that that doesn't actually change the outcome. Now, the acknowledgement aspect of this A brings in the power of naming what is so. And you have heard me in many podcasts talk about the power of just naming. I've talked about it in many guest podcasts that I've been on. When we can name what is so, then we can examine it. We can really examine it. We can brainstorm solutions. If there's a problem, if we're naming what's so, we can explore and become curious about what is needed in the moment. Acknowledgement also recognizes our need for regular positive recognition and feedback. Oftentimes, in our cultures, whether it's corporate culture or healthcare culture or even community culture, we have been socialized to that feedback is mostly negative. And oftentimes people don't take the time to provide positive feedback on a regular basis. But this pillar brings in this space of, we can name what's so, and we can give feedback that has us expand and grow. But we can also give feedback when things are going well, right? Speak to the wins, speak to the progress that is happening. And speaking of progress, the final aspect of the pillar, P, stands for practice progress over perfection. And so this pillar actually reframes the way we learn in any capacity in an ongoing journey. When I'm in a lot of my learning spaces, my facilitation spaces, I often bring in the 4 stages of learning. It's one of my favorite things to teach because it really does presuppose that learning is a journey. And sometimes we're socialized that learning is really a destination, or we're going to learn something and we're going to have to get it perfect. But when we look at learning in this way as a journey, as an ongoing journey, it invites in grace, it invites in growth mindset, and it invites in collective evolution. And so, in our fast paced environments and high intensity environments like healthcare and corporate culture, this ethos is really essential for retention, for resilience, for innovation, and for well being. So when we recognize that learning is a practice, we emphasize the commitment, the repetition, and the resilience of learning. And when we invite in progress over perfection, we disrupt the cultures of shame and fragility and fear of failure, especially in high performance and high pressure fields. And so when we look at guiding principles of this remap, when we lead with recognition, reflect, and respect, we honor humanity by witnessing it. And when we embrace emotional awareness with courage, we attune our emotions and build capacity to name and regulate them. And we do not bypass emotions, we build the capacity to hold them with integrity. When we practice modeling and mirroring and mending in our leaderships and our relationships, we lead not by image alone, but by how we respond when things break down. We model behaviors we wish to cultivate, like honesty, transparency, authenticity, integrity, courage, humility, empathy, and self compassion. We mirror the tones we want to reflect, like emotional courage. We mend when rupture or harm occurs, and we take responsibility and restore connection when necessary. When we practice adaptability, accountability, and acknowledgement, we don't just shift conversations, we shift how power operates within them, remaining flexible when navigating complex or emotional, culturally charged dynamics, taking ownership of our actions and their impact without avoidance or shame, and acknowledging power, privilege, identity, and harm when they are present, and centering the voices of those who historically have been silenced. We also practice acknowledgement by practicing bringing in positive feedback, bringing in recognition of our wins and of when people and things have gone well. And finally, when we practice progress over perfection, we free ourselves from fear and we free others from judgment so that change can happen. Rejecting the myth of flawlessness and embracing the value of learning through doing, prioritizing sustainability over performance alone and growth over image, normalizing feedback, repair, and iteration, recognizing that equity and trauma responsiveness are lifelong practices. And so, this framework, when you look at the totality of this framework, it really represents an important way, a foundational way that we can begin to connect and communicate with one another. This is the framework that I utilize in my Communication That Transforms course. And this is the framework along which I do most of my my teaching and facilitation and support of even my coaching clients one on one. And so I invite you to reflect on this foundational framework. What are the elements of the framework as you listen to it? And you may decide to go back and listen to this episode again that stand out for you, and why. Which of the elements of the framework do you feel may be your biggest learning edge? And how might you begin to practice the remap of your communication and your interaction, both with yourself and with others? All right. So, of course, I always got to leave you with a reflection. And if you are, of course, in an organization and you're listening to this and you're saying to yourself, wow, I really feel like this could be valuable in my organization, you know that you can reach out to me by directly reaching out to me on LinkedIn, connecting with me on LinkedIn, or you can go to my website, mindremappingacademy.com. And this is a place where you can reach out and we can have a conversation about what the REMAP framework might look like implemented inside of your team, inside of your community, inside of your organization. All right. And this is a framework that can be deployed at any level of an organization, whether it be from C-suite leaders to the middle management to your frontline staff and clinicians if you're in healthcare. So it's something that I'm starting to work with organizations on directly, taking teams or cohorts through the course, through the framework, and helping them to begin to implement this framework in their organization. You can also look, if you're listening to this, you can look at, well, how does this apply in my personal life? How does this apply in my family? How does this apply as a parent to my kids? How does this apply in my spiritual community, in my intimate partner relationship, in my friendships, with my family, my mom, my dad, my siblings, my aunts, my uncles, my grandparents? How does this apply across generations, right? So this framework is the work that I've been doing for the past decade or more. And I've been hard at work to bring these principles in a way that can be more easily remembered and digestible. And each one of them is so juicy and robust that we can go deep. And we might do that a little bit in the podcast. You might hear me, now that I've introduced this, refer back to this framework in future podcasts, how it relates back to the REMAP framework. And so with that, I'm, excited to hear back from you in whatever way that you want to communicate with me, whether you link up with me on any of my social media platforms, but particularly LinkedIn, whether you want to email me directly through my website, Dr. Maisha at drmaisha.com, or Dr. Claiborne at mindremappingacademy.com, whether you might be in personal relationship with me. So if you're in personal relationship with me, I'd love to hear your feedback. Leave a review, actually. Leave a review on the podcast. If you're on Apple, if you're on Spotify, if you're on YouTube, and you're listening to this podcast and you listen to this framework and you want to give me feedback, please make a comment and let me know how does this land for you? Where can you see the application in your life by applying this REMAP framework? So with that, if you haven't already subscribed and you don't want to miss more tips and more communication tips, trust building tips, really, really powerful conversations with guests that come up, then go ahead and subscribe now. I invite you to share this episode, share the podcast with 3 people in your life, with a friend, a colleague, a family member. And particularly this episode, especially if you're in an organization, I ask and invite you to share with people in your organization, because you never know who this framework could really land with and really go deep with. So I invite you to share this episode with others in your world, in your life. And finally, I appreciate 5-star reviews if you're enjoying this podcast and comments. With that, we are going to be on our mid-season break. And so, like I said, we're going to be doing some snippets and tidbits of other episodes of our most listened to or most popular themes that we've received feedback around. So that's what we're going to be doing on our summer break. So that means you can keep listening if you'd like. If you're new to the podcast and you've missed some of the earlier episodes or the earlier seasons, this will be a way for you to kind of get some snippets and catch up. Or you can just decide you want to go back and listen to the episodes from the first episode and catch yourself up on this mid-season break, whatever works for you. But we will be back with brand new episodes in the fall at the end of our mid-season break. So until then, have a safe summer, and until the next time we see each other, stay empowered.